Hi, thank you for listening. Today I want to talk about who Israel is, biblical Israel, and I'm going to show you, based on the Bible and a number of verses that make it pretty clear that the United States and Great Britain are the two nations that qualify as Israel. They qualified for the birthright, and it's quite clear in here that they received the birthright. And I'm going to and what all that how all that came about. And we're going to start. Well, about a year ago, I did a presentation on God's promise to Abraham, and that was about a lot of this information here. But I'm going to reduce this to strictly those two nations. We're not talking about Judah or what we call Israel today. If I make any reference to what we call Israel today, it'll just be, I'll refer to Jerusalem. That way everyone agrees that Jerusalem's the capital, and that refers to well, it's really Judah, but I know we call it Israel. So it'll be Jerusalem. So let's get started, because I have a lot I want to say, and if there's something that you think I missed, you're probably right, because there's a lot of information I probably tried to include last time, but this time I'm just trying to be more focused on these two major nations and how they evolved and how we got to where we're at today. Okay, about 3,500 years ago, we're going to start with Genesis 12, the first three verses. And this is about Abraham. Well, remember, keep in mind, Abraham's name originally was Abram, and God did later change it to Abraham. And his wife Sarah, her name originally was Sarai, and God changed her name to Sarah. And also, she was barren, and God had promised her a son named Isaac the following year, which he did deliver on. So let's go ahead and start verse 12, or chapter 12. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, and unto a land that I will show you. I believe that was the land of Canaan that he was going to send him to. I will make thee a great nation. Now we're getting started with these key words and phrases here. Make thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thy name great. Thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless you, and I curse them that curse you. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Okay, so Abraham left at God's request, took his wife Sarah and took his nephew Lot, and headed to the land of Canaan. Okay, in Genesis 17, 4, 5, 6, and 7, we find, well, we'll read it. As for me, behold, my covenant is with thee. Thou shalt be a father of many nations. So you see these different terms. They're pointing to something big, coming along. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. And for a father of many nations have I made thee. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful. And I will make nations of thee, and kings shall come out of thee. And I will establish my covenant between me and thee, and thy seed after thee in their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God unto thee, and thy seed after thee. One thing about, I use the King James Bible, and there's a lot of these and thous, and I don't mind them, but I'm going to try, and some people I know find them to be a nuisance, and I can understand that. So I'll try and be using the word the you instead of thee here. It's a little easier reading anyway. Okay. So Isaac was born. God promised, next verse here, Genesis 17, 15, and 16. And God said unto Abraham, as for Sarai, he changed her name to Sarah. And the verse 16, the more important one, I will bless her and give her a son also of ye. And I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of people shall be of her. And so we're finding that Sarah is a mother of nations, Abraham's father of nations. They're going to be blessed, be a blessing to the world, we'll find, and be many descendants they will leave behind. Let's see. Let's see here. Genesis 22, verse 16 and 17. Okay, this is about Abraham being obedient, and it goes back to God told Abraham to take Isaac up to a mountain in the land of Moriah, I believe it was, and to sacrifice him there. And uh, you can imagine how Abraham would have felt, because this son was the real son. This, he had another one, but it was with a maid, one of his maids, and that was never really the real thing. But this Isaac is. And so Isaac, he took Isaac, and he was going to uh, kill him. He was going to put a knife through his heart, and he was about to do this, and an angel of God stopped him and said, "Hey, it's not necessary. God is pleased. He believes that you would do what he says, and that's okay. You don't have to." So Abraham proved that he would do, and he would be obedient to God. He would do what God asked him to do. Now, the one thing that I need to read, okay, let me read this verse 16, 17 of Genesis 22. Okay, because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, and as the sand which is upon the sea shore, and thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies. So God is obviously pleased with Abraham. But what's really important here is to understand this gate, this word gate. Gates or sea gates. It says here, thy seed, your descendants, I'm paraphrasing, your descendants shall control the sea gates of the world. Pardon me. I have allergies and my throat is really dry. And so gates are passageways, ocean passageways, strategic locations for a ship to pass through. Safe passage, generally the best way to navigate the oceans are through what we call these sea gates. And the United States and Great Britain control them. I'm going to pause for a moment. So, as we were saying, these sea gates are very strategic for world trade, and whoever controls the sea gates often controls, that geographical area, as well as the trade that occurs, as a result of ships traveling through those sea gates. And the United States and Great Britain, when they controlled them, they were very benevolent. They were like they were just basically policemen who just watched them over with probably the United States Navy, and for about 150 years controlling these locations. And as long as people didn't cause trouble and start wars and so forth, they were free. Everyone, the entire world was free to pass through these sea gates, and it worked out fine. But since then, the United States has, through disobedience to God, as well as Great Britain, they have lost all these sea gates. I think there might be one left at Gibraltar, and that area that Great Britain controls. I believe they still control that area, but Great Britain is becoming very weak militarily, and they probably will lose it, at any time. And so what's happened? The sea gates are going from the west to the east. They're going from, they're going out of good, honest hands, to people like China, who are very, criminally oriented, and they will use those sea gates to actually to oppose us in the future. And so anyway, it's just important that we understand what these gates are, because they're part of the blessing. They are a big part of the blessing, the physical blessing that's going to Abraham's descendants. Okay, Genesis 24:60. This is about Isaac has now he's 40 years old. He wants a wife, and his father Abraham is going to send his eldest servant to his family, which is in the land of Nahor, Mesopotamia, and they're not going to Canaan, because that land is it's basically godless. And so Abraham had said, make sure you go to Nahor, Mesopotamia, and fetch a wife for Isaac. And so he loaded up his camel train, and he left. And when he arrived, was greeted by a young lady named Rebecca, who will find that he becomes she returns home with the servant to become Isaac's wife. And so here's what was in verse 60. We see with the family that as they gave gave the young girl and the servant a big send off. They here's what they said. And they blessed Rebekah and said unto her, Thou art our sister, be uh, be you the mother of thousands of millions. And that's a big number, thousands of millions. And so this is referring to the, like the number of the sands of the seashore. A lot of descendants will come from her. and let thy seed possess the gate of those who hate them. So here again, we see gate mentioned. And we control the gates. Our enemies would have taken them, apparently, if God had not given them to us. But the enemies, we've controlled them for, like I said, about 150 years, and we're in the process of losing the last one now. And that's because we've been disobedient, and we've just been careless with how we manage God's assets. All this belongs to Him, of course. And so God's very, very angry, very upset with us, and He's going to allow us to be punished as a result of not only losing the gates, but it's more than that. It's just it's a lot of things that we've done and failed to acknowledge God in. Okay, we'll just continue on here. So Genesis 35, 10 and 11. Now, in verse 10, God said unto them, Thy name is Jacob. Your name shall not be called any more Jacob, but Israel shall be thy name. And so we find that Israel is now. Now we're hearing about the name Israel, and we know where that's going to be. That's going to be on the two Israel's grandsons, those two boys that will be born to Joseph. And verse 11, and God said unto him, I am God Almighty, be fruitful, multiply, a nation and a company of nations. Okay, you understand that, a nation and a company of nations. That, who else could that be but Great Britain? I mean, there's no other country, nation, or a land in the face of the earth that could qualify as they have, as the Bible is described here, to be one of these two recipients of the blessings. And also, and kings shall come out of thy loins. And so that's a big statement there. Now, just a side note, Genesis 37:3 does say that Israel loved Joseph more so than any of the other boys. And the other boys, the other 11 brothers, they knew it, and they resented him, and they were jealous, and they did have an opportunity to basically to get rid of Joseph. They wanted to kill him, but they sold him into a camel train that was heading to Egypt, and he went to Egypt, and he actually became a blessing. A curse became a blessing, because the Pharaoh there liked, after a couple, there were a few tough years for Joseph, but eventually he became governor because he proved to the Pharaoh that he was loyal to him, and he also had a relationship with God, which benefited the Pharaoh, and so he was very well liked, and eventually his family came there when there was a famine. Joseph was a governor and handled the food storage and buying grain and then reselling it during 7 years of famine, and his family had moved there for the food, and then the Pharaoh treated them really well, and it was not until Pharaoh died and then new Pharaoh came on the scene that all that slavery business started. Okay, let's see, and let's see. So we're at Genesis 26:5, and this is just a short thing I wanted to add, because the Abraham obeyed my voice. Abraham obeyed God's commandments, His statutes, His laws. What else is his charge? I think charge refers to just basically honoring God's law, and holding it up, not just being really abiding by it, and paying attention to God's law, and treating it with respect. And that's what and God really appreciated that, because a lot of people don't do that. Okay, Abraham was obedient. That's the bottom line, and God loved that. Genesis 41, 50, 51, 52. And unto Joseph were born two sons. So this is, okay, before the years of the famine came. He's in Egypt now. And which Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bare unto him. And Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, and he called the second, the younger one, Ephraim. So now we've identified Israel's two sons. Okay, the name of Israel has been established here. We've established there's two sons that are sons of Joseph, and they're going to receive the birthright. Okay, in Genesis 48, 4 and 5, we see more about the birthright promise and about Manasseh. Now, Manasseh's the United States, so we know the United States has been the greatest, the wealthiest nation ever to exist. I mean, we have wonderful climate, we have water, we have different seasons here. I mean, it's really we're industrial base. We've really had about everything in the world. Probably many nations of the world that people dislike us, hate us for everything we have. They're very jealous, and plus we haven't handled our wealth very well, our blessings, and we've abused them and wasted them, and so God is going to punish us. That's the whole idea of understanding who Israel is, so that we can understand what's coming. Okay, and so we'll read 4 and 5. And said unto me, Behold, this is God speaking, Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. And now thy two sons, sounds like Jacob speaking, or Israel, and now thy two sons Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came into the land of Egypt. Remember, Joseph's already there, and when the famine came, his family came also over there, not knowing that Joseph was working for the Pharaoh, and was in charge of the grain distribution. And so he revealed himself after a couple trips that the boys had made coming to get grain for the family. So here's what he says: And now thy two sons Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon they shall be mine. So Reuben was the oldest boy, and Simeon was also, I think he was the second oldest. He was going to treat Joseph's two sons as his, like his own boy here, and so he basically adopted them with his name. And let's see. So we'll move on to Genesis 48, 16 through 19. So let me read this. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless the lads, and let my name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. So there's again a multitude. That's a lot of people. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, remember Manasseh was the oldest one, and he should have received the birthright. Normally he would have, except Israel blessed the younger one instead. It displeased him. It displeased Joseph, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. For the right hand, put thy right hand upon his head. Well, verse 19 says, His father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He, referring to Manasseh, also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So what we see here, uh, Manasseh, the United States, will become uh, a great people, but truly his younger brother shall be greater. So Ephraim was really greater, was larger than the United Kingdom has been, but than the United States. But you have to, I believe that the United States, well, I, I've forgotten a lot of history that I learned in school uh, about this situation, but let it be said that the United States has really been, militarily speaking, and so many other areas, we've been really the greatest nation on the face of the earth. But Great Britain uh, technically has been greater, but I guess that's what the Bible says, so we'll just go with that. Anyway, uh, so the and being greater than he uh, shall become a multitude of nations. This is it describes here the United Kingdom, and there's some. I think yeah, okay. We'll just continue with this. In 1 Chronicles 5, 1 and 2, it talks about Reuben. Now, like I said, Reuben was the oldest boy, and normally he would have received the birthright. But what happened was that he had slept apparently with one of his father's maids, and so he had defiled his father's bed. That's how that was presented. And so let's see what happens here. This is 1 Chronicles 5 and the first 2 verses. Now the sons of Reuben, the firstborn of Israel, for he was the firstborn, but as much as he defiled his father's bed, his birthright was given unto the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. Okay, so that's important to understand. The birthright went to the sons of Joseph, the son of Israel. And the genealogy is not to be reckoned after the birthright. So it's basically God has made this arrangement, and this is how it's going to be. And so the birthright is that included those sea gates that I've talked about, and the 2 countries, the landmass of both the United States and Great Britain. Now in Genesis 49:22, we see that there's a verse here describing Joseph. What had happened here in verse 1 of Genesis 49? It says that Joseph sat down with the sons. I'm sorry, Jacob or Israel. Israel sat down with the 12 boys and was describing to those boys what would befall you in the last days. And that's right off the quote from that verse. But so what befalls him in the last days? Well, the last days are now. And so Israel was describing basically the nature of the descendants, their character, their good qualities or bad qualities of each one of these boys. And so here's what he says about Joseph. Joseph is a fruitful bow, even a fruitful bow by a well, whose branches run over the wall. So a fruitful bow, a bow or a bough is a large tree branch, and so it refers to a well alongside the tree. So that means there's water. That it's a symbolism for water. And then the branches run over the wall. That refers to the spreading out of the descendants. They basically went around the world. There's 12 tribes, and remember they multiplied. These families had a lot of kids, and they multiplied, and they went all over the world to live and to develop different locations. And so that's them. Okay, now what we've done, I've discussed here all these different events and different things happening that kind of contributed to the evolution of the growth of Israel, the expansion and development of Israel. But now it's like at the end of that game, and now it's time. We're at the end, so now the end is going to mean punishment for Israel. And so now we're looking at losing. We're in the process of losing our nation. one of the great things about this country was the Constitution. It's a Constitution we have, and that's based on the Bible. And no Gentile, no godless individual could possibly appreciate that Constitution, which is one of the big problems we have in this country now. These people that want to destroy our country, they want to destroy the Constitution and and just destroy the country. And so this is a big deal. This is why, because God has been left out and has been ignored and pushed aside. This is why all these awful things are happening to our country now. And the Bible has there's much prophecy to describe all these different awful, terrible, acts of violence that's occurring in our country. And it's really pretty amazing. Of course, God would know all this was going to happen, but it's really pretty interesting to read. The prophecy is so accurate; it's really something. Hard to not deny, the truth that the Bible presents to us. But I wanted to read Deuteronomy 28:52, and he refers to the Gentile nations, so that would be. It'd be like Germany runs the European Union basically, and it'd be Russia and China and all these other smaller countries that will tag, and Iran, and I think they're going to be out of the picture early on, but after when the tribulation starts. But there's a lot of Gentile countries that really, they don't like us, and they're going to try and overpower us, and they will eventually. But anyway, and so he shall besiege thee in all thy gates, and there's gates again, and understand this is really important, and until thy high and fenced walls come down. And so I think about our beloved President Trump rebuilding the southern wall, and I think he's doing a wonderful job. But the Bible does say that much of what he's going to do will be all undone, after he leaves office, and after we will be invaded and we will be conquered by these Gentile nations. And the Bible clearly states that and many people who aren't killed, many will go into captivity. In fact, there'll be so many people taken out to another country that no one will even want to buy them, because there'll be so many of them. I guess it's like anything else, the more you have of something, the less value it is. And so either way, it's not going to be good for those people. They're going to be slaves. A lot of people, and that's why all this is so important to understand, because God, He's not going to grant us any favor if we don't understand the truth and don't study it and don't learn what He has in mind for. He wants us to understand all this stuff, whether we like it or not. He wants us to know the truth, and many churches don't teach the truth now, and that's so unfortunate. But it really hurts the people like us. We're the ones that need to know it, to know these things. So that's why I wanted to, do this, just to put it out to you one more time. Okay, so until the high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou hast trusted throughout all thy land, and he shall besiege thee. He again referring to the Gentile nations. He shall besiege thee in all thy gates, and there's gates again. They're going to they've taken the gates, and they'll use them against us. We're going to be, on the receiving end of God's punishment now. Throughout all thy land which the Lord thy God hath given thee. So there it is. He's given us all this, and we've squandered it. So here's sea gates. Here's a couple: Panama Canal, Suez Canal, Hong Kong, Sri Lanka, Singapore, and then there's also Bab-el Mandeb Strait. That's a section of water south end of the Red Sea, over there in the Middle East, near the Arabian Sea and Yemen. And then there's Gulf of Aden. That's at the South Red Sea location. These are where oil tankers, waterways that oil tankers use. Strait of Hormuz, that's a 21-mile wide bottleneck. It's you can see it on the map once you find it. It's really easy to recognize. It's like a long peninsula going out into like a span of water, and it reduces the width. the passage there to 21 miles, which isn't much at all, and it's an easy place to hijack a boat or a ship, oil tanker in this case. Yeah, and we've seen Iran do that a few times. Last year, I think it was. And then there's South Africa, southern end of it has the Cape of Good Hope. But here's one point. Now we mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention, but South China Sea. Now that's in the news. We hear about that all the time. There's well, I wrote it down here. There's $5.3 trillion of freight that goes through there, probably on those container ships every year. Now, if the United States was controlling that, there'd be no problem, because as long as no one was causing trouble and starting war and all that kind of thing, they were left alone. But now with China, they've taken those islands that don't even belong to them, and the small islands in that area, and they've been, expanding them, as we all have been hearing about over the last year, and putting like a miniature military base on them, and they're going to control all that waterway, and they're whether or not they realize it, they're preparing for World War III, because they will be. I believe Ezekiel talks about they're going to be, I think, they're going to be part of the invasion of the United States. So they're all coming after us. Wow, unfortunately. Now you might want to look at. There's some good verses that deal with the end times, and because we're going to losing these gates is an indication, right? We're coming to the end, and it's important to understand what God's going to do. I mean, if this doesn't strike a little fear in you or concern, well, then there's something wrong. But you ought to read Deuteronomy 28 verses. This is not for the faint of heart. Verses 52 through 57. You really should read that. You want to see how bad it's going to be. I mean, really see how bad things will get. You read verses, and you should read the whole chapter, really. But verses 52 through 57, there's plenty there to read. Then try verse 41 and 47. And then also, I talked about Germany. The ancient Germans were Assyrians, and the Bible has a lot to talk about them, has a lot to say about them. In Isaiah 10, verses 5 through 7, talks about the rod of, this is God's rod of his anger, and he's using the Syrians to punish us. So he's using modern day Germany, which was ancient Syria, or Syrians. He's using them to punish the United States and Great Britain. And keep in mind that the Syrians attacked Israel this is after Israel and Judah, or I should say Jerusalem for our purposes, after they split up around 1100, I think, BC. But what happened was that about 722 BC, the Syrians,